pretty common question that most artists gets is, how long did that take you? Because it looks very, well, it is very intricate. You have little tiny wires and you're making a big thing. That is the first question. The second question is, I've never seen anything like it, which is more of a statement. And it's true. They never have, because I invented it. Now, it's a very complicated process. You have to start with an original, you have to make a mold, you have to make a wax, and we'll go through all that in the process of making this video. Hi, I'm Virginia Harrison, and I weave really beautiful bronze sculptures. The first thing we need to do to start a process for casting a bronze is to make a wax. So I'm heating it up until it's molten. So the idea is that if I just put wax directly in here, it would stick. It would just stay there. I could never get it out. So I'm going to coat the whole thing. So make sure I get it every little inch. This mold was made of an actual clay pot that a friend made for me. And then the rubber mold is made from a two-part material that you pour a brush onto it or pour over it. And then you have to put the plaster around it to keep it stiff, otherwise it'd be all wobbly. You can make molds off of any solid object, wood or clay or wax or stone, just about anything really. I'm just stirring it to speed it up and because it's fun. I think we got it. So the trick is try not to splash wax on your bare skin. So you can see how it's coating the sides. Just swirl it around so it's even. Since I got this going, I'm going to do it a little bit over here, because when it spills, I don't want it all over everything else. I didn't have quite enough in there to get the rim, so I put a little more in, but then at the end I'll pour out the excess. So there you have the first coat. All right, we'll go again. All right, we're getting there. So there you have it. That should be thick enough. And that's that. Yeah, so I have to take this rim off because it's attaching the plaster to the mold material, because when I poured out the wax, it had to go over that. So again, you melt and cool and melt and cool. So see this rim here? That's about how thick you want the wax to be. Any thicker would be really heavy. Okay, so now I'm going to take the plaster off. It's just held on with bolts. Now you'll see that this mold also has a cut in it. And so we start there and peel it back. Now the wax is still fragile, so you can't just go willy-nilly, but it will come off. Ah. Okay, so you can see possibly there's a little bit of seam there that I can clean up just with an ordinary kitchen knife. Make this rim a little prettier. And then we'll take it to the foundry and they'll do a process called gating, which we'll show you later. Back in the late 80s, I decided I wanted to go back to school and enrolled in Sonoma State and took a whole bunch of different classes, but focused in the art department. Learned how to weld, and for one project I needed to do a basket representing myself, and that's how I started the whole process of weaving, which I immediately fell in love with. The first basket I made out of almost found materials from a recycling. So it was copper and aluminum, some other cables and things. It didn't hold together at all, but it looked good for, at least I got a good grade on it, so that was good. Then I just stuck to copper and aluminum and then just copper. But copper has its limitations, and plus I had to use recycled materials, which was, fine, but tedious. But the idea of weaving really appealed to me. And the idea of making art, making woven pieces that weren't just vessels, weren't just something you carry something in or you sit on, a table, that I could make different shapes. And that was very intriguing. So for the piece I'm working on right now, I will have that urn, and then I will have weaving coming out of 2 or 3 different weaving pieces, somewhat like this, maybe bigger, maybe smaller. But to do the weaving, first you have to drill some holes to put the spines in. And it has to be an odd number of spines, otherwise weaving doesn't work. So I made these templates with a protractor to give me 15 equidistant markings. Sometimes I use 9. I've used up to 92, but that wasn't a lot of fun. So in order to drill a hole, you need a punch to get it started. It's gonna be loud. So before this was nice and shiny and pretty, the way it is now, it looked like this coming off the pour. So the next thing, I'm going to drill it. So now we have these nice holes, but I have to do a countersink along the back because there has to be enough space for the molten metal when I weld it to fill and make a good weld. So that's what I'm going to do now. All right, ready to go. So the next thing to decide is how long the spines need to be and if they need to be curved in any way. These are going to go on the outer layer and they just have a simple curve. They'll get welded down here. So for this piece I've decided to make them, 24 inches. So I have this handy jig that I made. What's this? Yardstick, an angle, and some clamps. Okay, so then I just measure here to 24. Clip it. So you see bronze is actually rather soft. It'd be very difficult to do this with steel, even at this gauge. I mean, you could, but it would take a lot more strength. So I'll put these over here to be used for some other project. And then this now has a very sharp owie on it. So I'm going to take it over to my belt sander and sand it down. And so next I want to bend them into some interesting shape. So since these are going to be in this vessel here, I really don't want them to start doing anything interesting until this far out. So for continuity, I'm just going to draw a line across here. And then decide what kind of curve I want these to have. This is actually a jig that stained glass workers use. So you can do a simple curve, or you can do a complex curve. The trick is getting them all to match. So here's your urn, and this is one of the things coming out of it. That's kind of cool. I haven't done that part of the design yet, so I'm just going to show you the process without making any lasting decisions. Welding, yay, welding. So there are many kinds of welding. The one I prefer is called TIG welding, which stands for tungsten, which is this piece of metal right here. Tungsten doesn't melt as quickly as bronze. So with welding, you need a current. So what you have is a ground, which is connected to the table, which is a metal table. And then it is so hot that it will melt the bronze. The spark that's created by TIG welding is as bright as the sun. There you go. So I finished my schooling, knocked around for a bit, and then got a job at a foundry. A foundry is a place where basically we melt bronze, pour it into a mold, and it becomes a work of art. Well, for our foundry, it's art. Other foundries do other things. You could call a steel mill a foundry because it melts metal and turns it into something solid. But basically, it's a way for artists to bring something in that they've made either in clay or wood or stone, even in metal, and have it be replicated over and over again. So you can have an edition of 100, but usually it's more like 12 or 25 of the same piece that you've created. So once we've made the wax, we have to find a way to transform this into bronze. So there's an elaborate process whereby we add tunnels, if you will, because we have to find a way to get the bronze from the crucible into the empty mold that will be surrounding this. It's called gating or sprueing. This here is Jim Pilar, who owns the foundry and runs it. And he's going to show us how to do it. That pot has what's called sticky wax, which helps the gating adhere to the piece and to the other pieces of gating. It's a different kind of wax. So the idea is that you also want a smooth transition. You don't want any corners or sharp edges where it would interrupt the flow or cause turbulence when the bronze is going in. Okay. When they were using plaster molds, you had to put literally hundreds of small little tubes for the air to escape. As the bronze goes in, the air has to go somewhere. And with the shell material, somehow there's enough porosity that the air escapes. So you don't have to have as many vents for the air to escape as the metal goes in. Still have to have a few. So they not only help the wax come out, but they help the air escape.
Okay.
Marvelous. Then they attach a cup like this, and that's where the bronze will go in. Go through these pipes here, fill the space, and then you'll have a bronze vessel instead of a wax one. So once we get the gating on, all set and ready, we'll bring it over to the shell room. What we do in here is coat the waxes in ceramic shell. So the shell room has to be an enclosed space so that it's dry and cool, because you can imagine if it heated up in here, all these waxes would just melt away. So you can see Here's a wax that's been gated and is ready to be dipped. This is silica suspended in some sort of interesting material that somebody figured out. So we're putting on the first coat of slurry. It was originally created by the aerospace industry for casting airplane, or I guess jet engines. And then you bring it over here and coat it with very fine silica sand. So then you set it over to dry overnight or for a few hours. And the next day you come back and do it all over again. So the process itself takes, what, a week or so? So each day it dries, and then each day you dip it again, and little by little you build up about a quarter of an inch of shell material. So over here you see molds in various stages of completion, all the way from just getting started with the very fine sand to more and more coats. These are places that they've put vents so that when the wax melts, it actually expands, so it needs lots of places to flow out. If you just let it flow out from the cup, it could crack the mold. All right, that's the shell room. I really like dead trees, and they make some really interesting shapes. The other one is I often listen to music and just let the shapes develop in my head based on how the music moves the energy around. The first musical one I did, I got the idea when I was sitting in a bar, a blues bar in Chicago. And I just sort of closed my eyes and was feeling it. It was Little Milton. And I got this shape in my head. And so I actually drew it on a napkin, and I hung on to it. I did another drawing of it on a piece of paper, and it just sat around. This is way before I was even weaving. And it turns out that to have produced that piece in existence now, 4 feet across and 6 feet high, solid bronze would have been ridiculously difficult and expensive. But to do it with the weaving gave it motion, gave it a life that it wouldn't have had if it had been solid bronze. And that's what's one of the beautiful things about the weaving, is that there's a movement to it and a softness to it. This piece behind me, I did originally listening to Jimi Hendrix up in Seattle, not to him specifically, to a movie about him. It's called The Three Graces. But it turns out that it's kind of a self-portrait of me and my 2 daughters, which is kind of interesting how self-portraits happen in all of any artist's work. Well, they mean pretty much everything because they are part of me. And they're a part of me that I didn't necessarily know existed. They express a part of me that oh my gosh, they're beautiful. And to me, that's really important. I appreciate a lot of art that is, political, interesting, has a message, looks like something else, is figurative. But for me, I'm just creating beauty. And to me, that's really important, to bring beauty to the world, because when we're doing creative, beautiful things, we're not doing bad, terrible things. The big pieces take years. The smaller pieces can take, if I have the base, it takes maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Now, Medusa took years because I had that mask cast for years, and I kept wondering what I was going to do with it and thinking about it. And then I thought, I'll do Medusa. And not to make light of it, but Medusa is a really intense, powerful story. And I chose specifically to have her eyes open because originally the mask, as you can imagine, because it's my own face, the eyes are closed. So I sculpted the eyes open because I wanted her to be aware and calm about what had happened to her in terms of her hair turning into snakes, and that she still had the confidence to be a beautiful woman. Yeah, they're nice snakes. They're Medusa snakes. Medusa's snakes are her own, they were created by Athena, the goddess Athena, and they're meant to protect Medusa. So, they're not going to hurt you if you don't hurt them. They're like a really good dog. That's my own opinion. And then you have to, what you would think of polishing it, but it's not like shiny polish, but you have to make the bronze look pretty, because after casting it just has all these things on it, and you have to smooth it all out, make it pretty. So that takes some time. right. There are two different types of welding machines. One is called MIG and one is called TIG. The MIG machine has a spool of wire, and it spools through this long hose, because you need to be over where you need to, away from the machine. And it has a trigger, and when you pull the trigger, the wire feeds out. Well, if you're welding, the wire will melt into the bronze. So you're making a connection, an electrical connection, that creates intense heat. That's why you have to wear that shield. And it melts into the groove that you're welding. So at the end of the spool, there's 10 feet of wire that you just pull out because it's just left over. And being a bunch of guys, it was always lying around on the floor. And I thought, look at that wire lying on the floor. I wonder if I could use that to weave like I used with copper. Because it was there on the floor of the foundry, and of course I'd pick it up and they'd melt it back down into the crucible. But I started collecting it. And then I thought, well, why only use 10 feet of wire when you have a whole spool? So I got myself a small MIG machine and a spool of wire. And if you don't hook up the ground and you don't aim the wire at a metal thing that's grounded, it's not going to melt, it just comes out. And so here I have just this machine that feeds me bronze wire that I can weave with indefinitely. So I'll turn on the machine, feed out a bunch of wire, and hopefully not to forget to turn it off. And then turn it off, weave that wire, turn it on again. You know, I think if I hadn't seen it lying on the floor, it would have been sort of invisible because it's just in the machine. With fabric, or with, say, yarn, or even reeds or bulrushes or whatever, even twigs, you can start with a weave. You can start sort of like this, where the fibers weave into each other. Bronze is too stiff to do that. I couldn't ever start just the traditional way, so I figured, well, I'll just cast a bowl and then add the spines. That's how I have to do it in bronze. I have to start with a base, and sometimes it's just a disc this big, sometimes it's a bowl, sometimes it's a hole, depending on what I'm working on. So I take the bronze bowl or disc and I weld stiff wire into it, like straight wire, and then just make a little loop and weave and weave and weave and weave around. And then at the top, I solder a rim on it so that the weaving doesn't just sort of fly off. Well, when I originally made the mold of my face, I decided to go ahead and make 4 versions of it. But one of them broke in transitioning from one studio to another. But I thought, well, that doesn't matter. I'll cast it anyway. So I cast it broken. And then it turns out that I wanted to use it on this piece that I made. It turned out to be about the death of my husband. And so I call it Broken Dreams. And it has a crack through the face. So me and the face are still in functioning, but there's a break. Things were slowing down a lot. I felt like I had lost my muse, my support. I mean, along with everything else. So it took went into slow motion for about 6 years. And then just recently, as it turns out, I took a class at the JC in musical theater, and my brain turned on again. My creative side got reignited. And so even though I don't have Alan as my muse, I mean, at least here, I feel excited about trying new work again. I'm fine selling my work, but that's not where I'm at right now. It's like, yeah, come buy my work. I won't work on commission. And so I'm just going to keep making it and hope people want it for their places. Otherwise, I'll just have it all in my house, in my yard. But you know, you asked me the other day if I wanted recognition, and I thought, oh, not me, I don't need recognition, but I've decided I do. The National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. It's an only women's art museum. I think this really needs a lot of space to be seen, and I would like lots and lots of people to see it. And I would like that and whatever else of my work they want in a museum. I would like that kind of recognition.